An ancient hero reawakened to fight monsters from humanity's distant past who now threaten the modern world. It sounds like a pretty box-standard superhero story nowadays, but things were a little bit different back in 2000. It had been over 10 years since the last full-length Kamen Rider season with Black RX. I mean, there were a few movies with the original Shin Kamen Rider, the one not directed by Hideaki Anno if you're confused, then Kamen Rider ZO and J afterwards. But there wasn't any real presence for Kamen Rider on television between the years of 1989 and 2000. For Toei, the franchise at that time just wasn't seen as profitable. It's a story many iconic Japanese characters have gone through, but things changed near the turn of the century. Okay, so this is about to get weird, so I need you to stick with me here. See, back in the late 90s, Sega was attempting to market their new console, the Sega Saturn, and to be honest, things weren't looking so hot for them, so they came up with a brilliant marketing idea. Threaten the ever-loving shit out of their consumers. They created Segata Shanshiro, a martial artist who had an unhealthy obsession with the console and would beat the shit out of you if you didn't own one. And who better to play him than the man who had been beating people up on TV for decades? They got Hiroshi Fujioka, who was best known for playing Takeshi Hongo or Kamen Rider Ichigo in the original series. This marketing campaign was a massive success and catapulted Hiroshi Fujioka back to the top of Japanese public consciousness. And thus, with his renewed popularity, the popularity of his previous work got renewed as well. And thus, old Kamen Rider toys began to fly off the shelves. And so, in the wake of this, Toei decided it was finally time to reintroduce the world to our favorite masked rider. No, not that one. Kamen Rider Kuuga would begin airing on January 30th of 2000, running until January 21st of the following year. Primarily written by Naruhisa Arakawa, who'd previously only written one episode of the original Kamen Rider Black, along with the famous, or infamous, depending on who you ask, Toshiki Inoue, who is very well known in the Kamen Rider community, most notably for being the main writer on some of the most contentious seasons, which are also some of my least favorite ones, being Agito, Faiz, and Kiva. He's also well known for, quote, ruining the second half of Hibiki. I quote there because I haven't watched Hibiki yet, but from what I've heard, I have little doubt I'm going to be in that camp as well. But to be fair, Toshiki Inoue has probably wrote the most Kamen Rider episodes for any single writer in the Heisei Era, working on most of Phase 1 and select series in Phase 2. Kuga's main composer was Toshihiko Sahashi, who later went on to compose for Agito, Hibiki, Den-O, Jio, and Geats. He's also responsible for composing Kuga's opening and ending themes, Kamen Rider Kuuga and Aozora ni Naru, which are both some of my favorite songs in the series, but we'll dive deeper into the music later. The series was extremely successful in comparison to its general budget, which was considered small even by the standards of the time. In truth, the series wasn't even planned to be a Kamen Rider series. It was only through the continued insistence and excitement of Takayuki Suzuki, an official with Toei at the time, that the series became a Kamen Rider season in the first place. But thanks to the success the series found, the franchise was greenlit for another season to come after, and the rest is history. Okay, so, I know I said I wouldn't be giving you a play-by-play, but I'm breaking that rule for the first episodes of each series, as they are, in my opinion, the most important ones in the show, as the tone, characters, and visual and auditory style of the show all starts here in the first episode. So, let's get started with Episode 1, Revival. The show begins with a shot of an ancient warrior fighting against some kind of monster. We see the same warrior again inside of a tomb. A slab of stone is placed over him, and we see a strange symbol on it as a hand brushes over the coffin. Cut to an indeterminate amount of time later in the modern day, or as modern as a 24-year-old show can be, we see a group of archaeologists placing their hands over the coffin. After inspecting it for a moment, they decide to open it, finding a mummified corpse inside. One of the researchers states that the corpse doesn't match any known burial practices for ancient cultures in the area, and as the camera pans downwards, we see a strange belt on the corpse's waist. The lead researcher tells everyone to get back to work, and the group disperses as the camera pans to the corpse's hand as it begins to twitch. We're then introduced to our main character, Yusuke Godai, played by actor Joe Odagiri, who we will talk about a lot later. We see Yusuke attempt to comfort a lost child at an airport via his juggling prowess, and much to surprise, it somehow seems to work. After the child is reunited with his parents, Yusuke takes off, and we see our next addition to the main cast, Sakurako Sawatari, another researcher who's investigating the ruins seen in the opening scene. As she answers the phone, we see a figure climbing up the side of the building and sneaking into the window, which turns out to just be Yusuke playing a prank on her. One Sakurako completely no-sells, as this seems to be a stunt Yusuke is prone to pulling. And it definitely is. Throughout the series, that man climbs through more windows than walks through doors. It really isn't explained deeply in the show, but Yusuke and Sakurako are very good friends and seems to have known each other for a long time before the beginning of the show. As the two are talking, Sakurako walks over to a computer she was using to find translation for the strange symbols found on the coffin in the ruins. As the translation finishes, she finds that the symbols stand for death and warning. She says that she should let the excavation team know, as it should make for good conversation, and I'm sure it'll make for a great conversation piece at their funerals, as the next shot we see is of the excavation team and their equipment going haywire. We see a shot from the perspective of something walking towards the researchers huddling in a corner. One of them is frantically calling the police, and we see a hand pressed to the face of one of the researchers. Right before we cut to a fallen camera on the floor, and the screams of the researchers fill the background. We cut back to Sakurako and Yusuke, the latter on the phone attempting to contact the excavation team, as Yusuke is already out the door, saying that he's going to go check on them in person. As Yusuke drives through the pouring rain, he sees a large beam of light come from the site, as we cut and see a shadowy figure stalking through the forest. It stops and seems to shoot some kind of energy from its hands into the ground, as we see countless hands begin to claw their way out from underneath the earth. Yusuke arrives to the site that morning to see that the police have already arrived and are investigating the site. He attempts to sneak in via the age-old trick of just pretending he's supposed to be there, but is caught by the third member of our main trio, Kaoru Ichijo, a police detective. Yusuke is questioned for a moment before handing his business card to Ichijo, which labels him as a professional dream chaser and the man of 1,999 skills. Ichijo orders him detained for the moment as Yusuke uses the classic "look over there" trick to escape the grip of the officer and attempts to run inside of the ruins, only to be once again blocked by Ichijo, who trips him and then proceeds to catch him before falling, earning Ichijo a thumbs up from Yusuke before threatening him with arrest if he continues to obstruct the investigation. As Yusuke leaves, he sees another officer run past him carrying the belt we saw on the waist of the corpse from the tomb. Yusuke looks at it for a moment, seeing a vision of the warrior from the beginning of the episode. We then cut to the police station where Yusuke and Sakurako have been asked in for questioning, as they had connections to the excavation team who were found dead by the time the police arrived on site. The two are shown a tape which is stated to be the only thing left intact from the site. The tape shows flashes of the excavation team running from some shadowed figure as the team screams in the background. The figure seems to hold up the belt as it says Kuuga before throwing it to the floor and charging the camera. We hear the team calling for someone to come and save them before the screaming continues, only to be cut out shortly before the tape turns to pure static. Yusuke and Sakurako are left to investigate the belt left behind as Ichijo is called away to deal with another incident. We cut to a group of police squad cars outside of a building that's been covered in a massive spider web. The police investigate for a few moments before they're attacked via the power of terrible CGI by a humanoid monster. And quick break here to note an interesting fact, the footage and subtitles I'm using for this review also subtitle the language of the monsters. But in the original Japanese version, as well as many versions of the subtitles, their language is not translated, as the language spoken by these characters is entirely made up for the series. So at the time of release, not even the Japanese viewers had any idea what the fuck these things were saying. At the same time, Yusuke and Sakurako are leaving the police station with the belt as they discuss deciphering the symbols on the belt as well. Right as a police car seen in the site of the attack drives through the front doors of the station with the spider-like monster in tow. The monster catches sight of the belt that fell to the ground in the commotion and once again uses the name Kuuga to refer to it. The belt begins to glow as Yusuke once again sees a vision of the ancient warrior. The monster begins attacking the nearby police officers as the sound of the chaos fades out as we hear Yusuke's heartbeat instead. As the heartbeat reaches its peak, the monster goes to strike at Yusuke, who rolls out of the way, picking up the belt in the process. He puts it on, believing that it must be some kind of weapon used to combat these monsters. And as he does, the belt begins to glow again, this time encompassing the entire room in a bright light. As it fades, we see Yusuke wincing in pain as the belt begins to fuse with his body, and in a few short moments the belt has disappeared completely, leaving only a hole in Yusuke's clothing where it once was and a red line across his waist. The spider monster once again attacks him, throwing him outside, and while he's still recovering from the pain, he has a few moments of getting his ass handed to him. Get used to that, it'll be happening a lot. But in desperation, believing he's going to die, Yusuke throws a punch at the monster, and as he does so, his arm transforms, covering it in a black, white, and gold armor. Yusuke stands, punches again, this time covering his other arm in the same armor. He begins to kick and punch at the monster continuously, each strike transforming him further and further into this new form via the power of 2000 CGI. And as the transformation completes, the belt once again appears on Yusuke's waist, the newfound strength behind his strikes forcing the monster to its knees as we pull back and see Yusuke in his transformed form for the first time. The shock of the transformation causing him to fall to his knees as the monster recovers, now referring to Yusuke as Kuuga, and he continues to fight. The fight is hard, and it's clear that the spider monster completely outclasses Yusuke in both power and skill. But as the monster has Yusuke pinned, Ichijo arrives via helicopter and begins to shoot at them both, not knowing that Yusuke is Kuuga. The spider monster is distracted as it attempts to climb up to the helicopter, giving Yusuke time to recover. The two of them battle in the helicopter as the monster continues to attempt to kill Ichijo until Yusuke finally kicks it from the helicopter and down through the roof of the building. Yusuke hops back up into the helicopter where Ichijo asks him if he intended to save him. Yusuke simply responds with a thumbs up. But before Ichijo can ask who he is, Yusuke drops from the helicopter, safely landing on the roof of a nearby building. From the thumbs up, Ichijo quickly puts the pieces together as we end the episode looking out over the setting sun as Kuuga's theme plays in the background. Now do you all see why I'm not doing a play-by-play kind of summary? Aside from just ruining the show for anyone who hasn't seen it, this video would probably be 4 hours long if I did, and ain't nobody watching that, so we're back to regularly scheduled programming from here on out. Episode 2, Transformation. Yusuke and Sakurako are eating at a cafe discussing Yusuke's transformation when Ichijo stops by and asks Yusuke to come outside to talk to him. Ichijo barely has the time to get out his question of if Yusuke was the one to fight the spider monster when he interrupts him and says, "Yeah, I fought the spider-looking guy." When Ichijo asks him why he did so, Yusuke says that it felt right for him to fight. Clearly not seeing this as a sufficient reason, Ichijo tells Yusuke to back off for now. Yusuke continues to pester him for information about whether or not the monster is still alive, and in his attempt to dodge the question, Ichijo inadvertently confirms that it is. Ichijo is then called to another homicide scene nearby, to which Yusuke follows close behind. While Ichijo examines the body, Yusuke overhears some pedestrians express concern for the priest of the church where the body was found. Yusuke, deciding to check for himself, sneaks inside via an open window, of course. He does find the priest, but he seems to be acting a little odd, avoiding the sunlight and almost charging at Yusuke when he sees him. Deciding that knowing that the odd priest is still alive is good enough, Yusuke leaves without investigating further. Late that night, Ichijo is alerted to a bat monster that's currently engaged with a police squad and goes to assist, with Yusuke following him once again. Yusuke attempts to transform and fight, but is shoved back by Ichijo, telling him to just leave it to them, not complying. Yusuke brushes past Ichijo and begins to fight, getting his ass completely handed to him and landing them both in the hospital. At the hospital, Yusuke attempts to apologize for screwing up the fight, but Ichijo snaps at him, stating that while he may have the ability and strength to fight, he has no obligation to do so, and that if he's not going to take this seriously, he shouldn't get involved. Yusuke then goes to the funeral for the head of the excavation team from the ruins. We see Sakurako offering her respects when a young girl, likely the man's daughter, begins sobbing and runs out of the house. Yusuke, who's been outside the whole time, sees her begin to break down as she leans against a wall. Yusuke watches the scene for a few moments and punches a wall in frustration. Meanwhile, a witness leads Ichijo back to the church from earlier, where he finds the priest that Yusuke found is actually the human disguise for the bat monster. The monster attacks him, throwing him around and knocking over a candle that lights both Ichijo and the church on fire. Ichijo is about to be killed when Yusuke drives through the doors and runs over the monster. Ichijo accuses him of learning nothing from before, but Yusuke stops him and says that these monsters have taken too much already and that he doesn't want to see anyone else cry. So he's going to take this seriously and fight. He asks Ichijo to watch his transformation as the belt appears again and Yusuke strikes his iconic pose for the first time. Yusuke fights again, now having a new red-colored armor to replace the white one. This form clearly has more power than the last, as Yusuke is able to keep up with the bat monster much more easily than before. The spider monster jumps in and attempts to even out the fight, but the morning sun scares the bat away, leaving the spider alone. Yusuke defeats the spider monster, causing it to explode. The final scene of the episode shows Yusuke, with Ichijo leading on him as the two watch the sunrise. Episode 3, Tokyo. Ichijo wakes in a hospital to a message from Yusuke stating that he's going to take things seriously and really get to work as soon as he gets back from a visit to Tokyo. Yusuke and Sakurako arrive in Tokyo, and the two split up as Yusuke decides to visit a preschool where his sister Minori works at. Meanwhile, Ichijo is receiving the results from a blood test on the spider monster that seems to imply these monsters are in some way human. The police have a meeting to discuss the monsters and reveal that there has been sightings of a total of 7. However, we see that they count both of Yusuke's forms as not only among the monster's ranks, but as two separate entities. Ichijo protests that number 2 and number 4, as they call him, shouldn't be considered a target as they saved his life, but he stumbles and backs down when solid proof of his claims is requested. Yusuke climbs into a window, again. Ichijo goes out to find the bat monster to try and prevent Yusuke from getting involved and thus getting shot. He runs into a woman with a rose tattoo on her face who speaks in a strange language. Ichijo intuits that this is likely another monster and stops her for questioning, to which she pushes past him and runs away, stopping him from following with a cloud of rose petals. But apparently this did jack shit, as Ichijo follows her anyway. He finds her talking to the human form of the bat monster, and the two become aware of his presence when his fucking phone starts ringing. The bat attacks him again, but is called off by the rose woman, and the two leave. Meanwhile, Yusuke is walking around Tokyo when he spots a man being attacked by a cheetah-like monster. Yusuke attempts to fight it, but both combatants stop as the police arrive and begin pointing guns at them as the episode ends. Episode 4, Sprint. The fight between Yusuke and the monster ends as both of them scatter as the police start opening fire. The next morning, Ichijo is called to Tokyo as well, as the police are starting to form a special task force to deal with the threat. Once there, he's almost immediately alerted to another attack by the cheetah monster, and he calls Sakurako in hopes of getting to Yusuke to call him off, but he's already gone. Yusuke sees a motorcycle cop chasing the monster crash and goes over to check on the man. After confirming he's okay, he steals the bike and rides off after the monster. He chases it for a while but isn't able to catch up to it at all, stalling on a set of stairs where Ichijo catches up to him. Ichijo takes Yusuke to police HQ to keep him from getting arrested, where he hears over the radio that the monster has engaged a police squad and that they're getting slaughtered. Finally coming to terms with the fact that the police really can't handle the situation, Ichijo gives Yusuke a state-of-the-art police bike called the Tri-Chaser 2000. Yusuke transforms and rides off. He arrives on the scene in time to save at least one officer, another detective named Sugita. Yusuke is now easily able to keep up with the cheetah using the Tri-Chaser, and he corners the monster inside of a building. Also, small tangent, but we see less and less motorcycle fights over the series as it goes on. It was said by a Toei official that this is because getting onto and fighting on a motorcycle just isn't cool anymore, which I beg to fucking differ. More officers arrive on the scene and almost shoot at Yusuke again, but Ichijo and Sugita call them off and allow Yusuke to defeat the monster. Yusuke gives Ichijo a thumbs up, to which he turns around before returning the gesture as he walks away. Episode 5, Distance. Ichijo drags Yusuke to the hospital to get a checkup by a friend of his named Tsubaki. Tsubaki says that the belt inside of Yusuke has its own kind of nervous system that sends out the signal for his body to transform. He also theorizes that should the nerves reach his brain, Yusuke might undergo a personality change as well as a physical one. Ichijo is later questioned as to why he gave the Tri-Chaser to Yusuke, but he simply says that the chief should trust him and that he'll take responsibility if Yusuke turns out to be an enemy of humanity. To which the chief agrees and rescinds the order to shoot on sight. Later, Yusuke is called to fight a grasshopper monster, but it has serious hops, so Yusuke is unable to fight it effectively and subsequently gets pushed down the stairs. Yusuke awkwardly climbs up but the stairs, only to get pushed down again, and through the power of not wanting to be pushed down the stairs a third time, Yusuke unlocks a new blue form for Kuuga, which it seems to increase his jumping ability but subsequently gives him much weaker punches, so he cannot resist when he is pushed down the stairs once again. Episode 6, Azure Dragon. Ichijo arrives on scene and attempts to shoot the monster, but Yusuke's in the damn way, so the monster flees at the sight of smoke wafting closer from a nearby smokestack for some fucking reason. Yusuke is taken to the hospital, but he heals incredibly quickly, being back on his feet before the day's even over, or at least it seems that way. Ichijo is given a new rifle, which I'm sure is bound to help, and then Yusuke gets called to another fight. He goes directly into his blue form against his will, but once again gets his ass kicked for a while until Sakurako shows up. She tells him that she translated a passage that says the warrior with a heart like water strikes his foes with a long weapon. Somehow understanding what the hell she's talking about, Yusuke breaks off a section of the railing and transforms it into a quarterstaff. Now with a proper weapon, Yusuke's easily able to defeat the monster. Episode 7, Grief. And now we get on to the other thing I'll be counting, which is all the stuff Yusuke puts the Kuuga symbol on. Trust me, there's a few. We get properly introduced to the daughter of the excavation team head, Mika Natsume, who I will likely bring up for this episode and never again, despite the fact that she's a recurring character. She brought in an artifact from the ruins to the police in hopes that it might help catch the monster that killed her father. Ichijo, not knowing anything about what the hell this thing is, tells them to visit Sakurako that she might be able to do something with it. And thank God for Sakurako, as she finally frees me from having to say monster so many times, as she finally translates the name of both the tribe that created Kuuga, known as the Rinto or Linto, I cannot tell with their accents, and the tribe that they fought against and has been recently revived, known as the Grongi. And I don't know if this is intentional, but it is interesting. Some of you may be, quote, cultured enough to know that Guro is a Japanese word for gore. So if you translated the first part of Grongi, which is G-U-R-O-N-G-I, and left the second part of it, it would be Gorgi, which is similar to the English word gory, which is definitely a way to describe their actions. Anyway, back on topic. Mika and her mother pay a visit to Sakurako and show her the artifact, which she passes off the topic to another researcher, an American named Jean, who I will also not be mentioning much. And apparently this man cannot read her room to save his life, as he goes off about how this will make a great topic for his research paper. Naturally, seeing this insensitive white man belittle her father's death, Mika does not take this well, to which he snatches back the relic and storms off. Meanwhile, Ichijo and Yusuke go to the Institute for Police Science, where new anti-Grongi weapons are being developed, and we're introduced to the head researcher there, Hikari Inokita, who probably will also not mention much. The police are finally alerted to another Grongi who's been using flight to kill people from great distance. Yusuke and Ichijo manage to figure out its pattern and go after it. They find that not only is there a new wasp Grongi on the loose, but the bat is also at the scene as well. Yusuke goes to fight the wasp while Ichijo scares away the bat. Yusuke climbs up the stairs and gets to the Grongi, and we all know how this will end. Yusuke cannot fly. And big surprise, he gets pushed down the stairs again. Through the power of getting very tired of this bullshit, Yusuke unlocks yet another form, and this time, it's green. This form has enhanced senses, but Yusuke, not being used to the tide of information, gets overwhelmed and falls down the stairs anyway. Episode 8, Archer. Yusuke manages to use his enhanced senses to dodge an attack from the wasp, but it gets bored of him and flies off. Ichijo calls Sakurako to see if she can help find some way for Yusuke to get a hold of his new powers, but she says that she's been busy as Mika is still missing after her earlier outburst. Ichijo decides to track down the wasp and minimize its damage while Yusuke tracks down Mika before she gets attacked herself. Now having the time to translate as the two boys do their work, she manages to translate a passage referring to the new green form that states, "The warrior who senses evil from great distance fires upon it with the wind's speed." She calls Ichijo to relay this information, and he puts together that Yusuke must need some kind of ranged weapon to fight in this form. Yusuke eventually managed to track Mika down to a beach because he noticed a string of seashells that she carried likely originated from this beach. The two talk for a while, and Yusuke manages to convince her to just have faith that he and Ichijo will find her father's killer and to help them as much as she can. The two's moment is interrupted as Ichijo arrives, yelling that the wasp is targeting Yusuke and is right above them. Yusuke transforms into his green form, now much easier to control being outside the city, and Ichijo gives him his revolver. The gun transforms into a kind of bow gun. The wasp fires a needle at Yusuke, but he dodges and catches it in midair before firing back at the Grongi, killing it with the power of friendship and this gun that he found. Episode 9, Siblings. If you're curious to why this episode is called Siblings, even though I won't be talking about the B-plot it's a reference to, watch the damn show. Yusuke has put the symbol onto a shirt now. I want it. The police joint task force is attempting to find some way to track down the Grongi to their hideout and have finally come up with a plan. They will use a good boy, I mean dog, to track their scent, where they will use a new gas grenade based on the grasshopper Grongi's aversion to smoke. Meanwhile, Yusuke pays a visit to Sakurako, who translated yet another passage, this time describing a warrior who fights with a sword, but she's yet to finish the translation. Yusuke goes out to fight yet another Grongi, this time a squid capable of unleashing globs of explosive ink, to which Yusuke once again gets his ass kicked but is saved by the power of Deus Ex overheating as the Grongi runs back into the water. At the same time, the good boy has led the police to the Grongi's hideout successfully, and they're now preparing a full raid of the building. Episode 10, Fierceness. Ichijo joins the raid, and as it begins, the police roll 2 of the new smoke grenades under the door of the building. They appear to have little effect beyond annoying the shit out of the Grongi as they attempt to evacuate the building. The police, for some reason, wait for the gas to entirely dissipate before they enter the building, giving the Grongi ample time to escape. But the police dog seems to catch their scent and runs off after them, getting ahead of its handler where the Grongi proceed to kill the poor bupper. Yusuke asks Ichijo to spar with him in kendo, as he thinks that practicing with a sword may lead him to some revelation on how to unlock this new form. Eventually, Yusuke simply stops fighting back, and confused Ichijo stops and asks him what he's doing. Yusuke only asks him to keep hitting him and not to stop until the fight's over. Ichijo complies and continuously hits Yusuke over the head with a bamboo sword. Yusuke, however, gives no indication that he can even feel the strikes as he continues to walk slowly towards Ichijo, not even raising his weapon. Eventually, Ichijo is pinned with his back to the wall as Yusuke swiftly disarms him. Yusuke says that he thinks an unyielding spirit is exactly what he needs to get in the mindset of this new form. Shortly after, the Squid Grongi begins attacking again, and Yusuke rides out to face it, transforming into his fourth and final base form, a heavily armored purple warrior that wields a long sword. The Grongi attempts to attack Yusuke with its ink, but much like his fight with Ichijo, he gives no indication that the attacks have any effect as he slowly walks towards the Grongi before impaling it on the sword, killing it. Okay, we're getting out of the establishment phase, so let's go a little bit faster. From here on in, I'll only be giving you all the bare minimum of the story, so if you haven't watched the show, this is your chance to get out. Alright? Alright, let's get going. Yusuke develops his own iconic rider kick as we learn more about his past through discussions with his grade school teacher, Mr. Kanzaki. He continues to put the Kuuga symbol on everything he owns as he's painting it on the head of the Tri-Chaser. Jean has gone down to the ruins from the first episode to join a second excavation team and has found a large number of artifacts similar to the one Mika brought in. Yusuke goes out to fight a Grongi, but is distracted by a vision of a giant beetle-like creature and the Grongi escapes. After the fight, Jean calls Sakurako to tell her that the artifacts have pieced themselves back together in the shape of a giant beetle. Yusuke goes out to visit her soon after, and when he sees the photos of the artifact, he knows that it's the same one that he saw in his vision. Jean and the excavation team decide to move the artifacts to Tokyo, and while they're in transit, Yusuke goes out to have a rematch with the Grongi. As Yusuke fights and defeats the Grongi, the artifact suddenly bursts out of the truck that was carrying it and flies off. Yusuke and Sakurako discuss the nature of these artifacts, and Sakurako shows him a partially translated passage. Yusuke jokingly reads it in a way that describes beetles as servants who transform into horse armor. Yusuke is surprisingly right on the money, as when he's called to fight another Grongi, the beetle attaches itself to the Tri-Chaser. Sadly, after the Grongi is defeated, the armor crumbles back into pieces as if losing power in some way. You cannot hide your meta-references from me! Sakurako finally translates the beetle's name as Goram, and thus we will be calling its combined form with the Tri-Chaser the Tri-Goram. Yusuke fights a mushroom man and takes a bad trip all the way to the hospital where he fucking dies. Just kidding. He's gonna be back. But before that happens, Tsubaki attempts to resuscitate him with the defibrillator, but it doesn't work. He calls Ichijo to break the news to him, which Ichijo takes on the responsibility of informing Yusuke's sister Minori, while Tsubaki calls Sakurako. Interestingly, the both of them tell the guys very similar things, basically stating that Yusuke has achieved every other impossible feat before this, why would he stop now? And their faith proves to be well placed when Tsubaki goes to check on Yusuke's body, and he finds that not only have none of the usual signs of death set in, beyond his heart flatlining, but that his body is also still warm. Not only that, but his body temperature is actually rising. Ichijo and the police once again fight the Mushroom Man, but as expected, they're completely useless. They're about to die when Yusuke arrives to kick the monster. And kick him again. Okay, now we're good. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Next episode is basically just a following action of the last one, as we get Tsubaki giving Yusuke a clean bill of health, which he immediately decides to prove to the audience as he climbs in another goddamn window. This is also where we learn that the stone in the belt is called the Amadam. It's not directly stated in the series, but the belt itself is named the Arkle. Yusuke puts Humpty Go Ram back together and goes out to fight the Mushroom Man, who's somehow regenerated through the power of making me fucking hurl. He defeats it, thank God, and we see electric sparks go around his ankle. Yusuke is ambushed by the Bat Grongi, but absolutely bodies it this time. As he's preparing to finish it off, some jackass runs him over. Is that a fucking Ichigo reference? As the police engage with an invisible Grongi, we finally get an explanation as to why they kill people. It's quite literally a game for them, one known as the Geguru. Yusuke shows up and defeats the invisible Grongi with the power of green and Go-Ram's user manual. Wait, since when has it talked? Sakurako goes to talk with Tsubaki about this tingly feeling Yusuke's been talking about. Tsubaki says it might be a sign that Yusuke's about to grow much stronger. Yusuke goes out to fight against a new armed Grongi that's been killing people via one of the many ways I'm sure this show gave some poor Japanese child nightmares. Okay, seriously, how does this thing talk? I need to know. Yusuke attempts to use the Tri-Go-Ram to defeat the Grongi, but they just shake the head off. Subsequently, Go-Ram breaks apart again like the world's shittiest gunpla. Just because he did it off screen does not mean that the new shirt does not count. Kuuga says, "Eat McDonald's, kids." With the help of Enokita giving him a place to do so, Yusuke attempts to utilize his Tingle to gain a new power for Kuuga, and it somehow works. The armed Grongi begins to attack Sakurako, but Yusuke arrives in time to save her. He fights the Grongi for a bit before he goes into a new upgraded purple form. This time with the armor fully purple with gold accents. Yusuke once again impales the Grongi, killing it. How did you even get that belt buckle? Seriously. Yusuke fights another flying Grongi, this time unlocking a golden upgrade to his green form. But the Grongi fires first, nailing him in the arm, causing him to collapse in pain, letting it get away. Unironically, episode 26 is great, and if nothing else, please watch this. I really wish I could convince myself to talk more about these amazing B-plots in some of these episodes. Gandamu? After Yusuke resolves this amazing B-plot, I'm sure you remember because you watched the show, right? He goes out and finishes the Grongi with a green golden form. Yusuke hunts down yet another Grongi and is ambushed again by the Ichigo reference. They fight, but the fucker takes a cheap shot, allowing it to beat Yusuke. Okay, so I've got nothing for episode 28, there's just not much here, but hey, look, gold blue form! Okay, so now we're on to the first Kuuga special, which is the hyper battle video known as Kamen Rider Kuuga versus the Strong Monster, Go Jinoda. Not much of note happens aside from Yusuke fighting a Grongi, and we get a first look at his new Rising Mighty form. Oh, right, this is where we actually get to know Kuuga's forms' names, in order. White is Growing, red is Mighty, blue is Dragon, green is Pegasus, and purple is Titan. The golden power is called Rising Power, so the upgraded forms are called Rising Forms, thus Rising Mighty, and so on. Why this is never stated in the actual series, I've got no fucking idea. Alright. Back to the main series. Tsubaki tells Yusuke that the cause for his new golden power might be the defibrillator he used on him. He immediately clarifies that he was joking, but we will find out later that he's actually right. He also notes that the Amadam's nerves have almost reached his brain, and reiterates his concern that Yusuke may go through a mental change should they reach his brain completely. Yusuke brushes this off as the Amadam just reacting to his desire to grow stronger. And then Yusuke fights a Grongi. Big surprise. And then he gets his ass handed to him before the Grongi runs away. Bigger surprise. Yusuke and Ichijo go out together to investigate the recent Grongi attack, and Yusuke tells Ichijo that he's going to try and use his rising power alongside his mighty form. He says that he feels like it may cause a lot of collateral damage when the Grongi explodes, but Ichijo simply tells him to leave that to him and to do what he needs to do. Yusuke fights the Grongi again and uses the Trigo-Ram to move the Grongi somewhere away from a population center. Yusuke carries it to an abandoned factory where, just as he feared, when he uses Rising Mighty, the result is an absolutely massive explosion that causes immense damage to the surrounding area. The next episode is a fucking clip show where nothing happens, other than Yusuke finally gets to push someone else down the stairs. Yusuke later gets jumped again by the funny reference man and loses again, big surprise. The police are hesitant to hand over an improved bike called the Beat Chaser to Yusuke after the massive explosion he caused earlier. Yusuke fights the funny reference man yet again, and the two have a motorcycle battle which ends with the both of them being thrown off. Ichigo manages to steal the Tri-Chaser, but it breaks down before he can kill Yusuke with it, before he states that he's going to save Kuuga for last. The police finally let Ichijo take the Beat Chaser to Yusuke as another set of officers set up a roadblock. You can actually see the actor in the distance waiting for his cue, I'm not kidding. Using the Beat Chaser, Yusuke is finally able to put the funny reference man down once and for all. Alright, so I'm not even going to try and be subtle here. These two episodes are, in my opinion, some of the best Kamen Rider episodes in existence. Honestly, I'd put them both in my top 10 episodes from any series in the franchise. So, here's the deal. If you haven't watched this show, this is your last chance to get out. I will be spoiling everything from here on in, and due to the impact this set of episodes have on the story, I'll have to go in depth. Alright, last chance off the ride, kids. Alright then. With that out of the way, let's talk about the only Kamen Rider episodes that legitimately gave me a nightmare as a 22-year-old man. This bit here is directly from my notes that I took for the show. The episode opens on an eerily quiet hospital room in the middle of the night. Underneath the covers of one of the beds is a boy in his teens. He says that someone told him that he would die in 4 days. We see his mother, sister, and father all by his bedside as he begins to panic as time is running out. His family attempts to calm him, but he's completely inconsolable, listing off many of his friends who died the same way. The room goes quiet as he begins bleeding from the nose. He begins clinging to his father and crying that he doesn't want to die. We see outside in the hallway, Ichijo is walking towards the room as another boy runs out calling for a nurse. Ichijo begins running towards the room but stops short of the door as we hear the boy Satoshi cry out in pain before his family begins frantically calling out his name. Behind Ichijo, who's struggling to retain his composure, a figure walks into frame. We zoom in on this person and are able to quickly realize that they're a Grongi, watching the final moments of their prey. Tsubaki finds that the cause of death is a small needle that enters the bloodstream, traveling to the brain before expanding, much like the weapons of many previous Grongi. We go to the funeral of Satoshi, where we see another one of his classmates break down in fear as they see the human form of the Grongi that killed Satoshi. But one of the officers attempting to console him looks up to see what he's looking at, but they see nothing at all. Ichijo and Yusuke discuss the case as they receive a call from HQ that the boy we saw at the funeral was taken into police custody, but he decided to commit suicide out of fear of suffering at the hands of the Grongi. Yusuke puts together that a death by suicide likely doesn't count for the Grongi's game, and with the information of another officer, they decide that the Grongi will likely go after a student who just transferred into the class the other victims were in. Ichijo orders a police detail to be sent to protect him, and Yusuke rides off saying that he'll likely be able to get there faster. We see the last victim, named Kazuya, and his parents in their vacation home out in the wilderness. They went there to hide from the Grongi, but it somehow tracked them down using illusions to make itself appear all over the outside of the house, torturing the family before finally attacking the father. Kazuya's mother and him escape outside, where they ask the Grongi why it's doing this, to which it only says that the more that they suffer, the more fun that he has. Yusuke arrives on scene and manages to save the family before they're killed, but the porcupine Grongi is able to defeat him by turning him into a common pincushion before telling Yusuke not to get in his way. Kazuya is taken into police custody, where he has a breakdown, loudly questioning why this had to happen to him. Yusuke tells him that there is no reason for this to happen to him, and that's why Yusuke won't let him die under any circumstance. He says that everyone who's here to protect him feels the exact same way, and that reassurance is enough for Kazuya to calm down enough for the doctors to give him a sedative. Yusuke patrols around the precinct, eventually stumbling onto a live TV broadcast on the death of the toll of this Grongi, numbering a total of 90 high school students. As the names are rattled off by the anchor, we see Yusuke hardly even blinking or moving at all, but we pan down to see his hands beginning to shake as we see flashbacks of Yusuke's conversation with Kazuya, where he told him what the Grongi said about enjoying their suffering. We then see Yusuke's arm flex as the veins begin to bulge out and he grabs the leg of his pants tightly in his fist, with the crying of the families of the victims playing in the background. Sadly, the Grongi does track Kazuya down to the precinct, where it uses its illusions to lead the officers on a wild goose chase. Luckily, Yusuke doesn't fall for this and finds the Grongi sitting in Kazuya's room waiting to strike. Yusuke transforms and tackles it out a window and pins it to the ground, hitting the defenseless creature in the face again and again and again, not letting up in the slightest. The porcupine begins struggling to breathe as it coughs up blood and eventually shakes Yusuke off and tries to flee. Even as it attempts to run away from him, he only grabs it and begins wailing on him again, offering not even a semblance of mercy in his assault. Yusuke gets onto the beat go-around and uses it to carry the Grongi away to a lake, launching it off a cliff and into the water below. The Grongi gets up and tries to throw its needles at Yusuke, but he simply uses Titan form so that they bounce harmlessly off of the heavy armor. With the water at its back, the Grongi has nowhere to go as its attacks become more and more desperate, struggling for its life. Yusuke walks up to it before unleashing a flurry of blows against it, eventually knocking it to the ground, where it looks helplessly up at him as he impales it into the ground where it explodes. In the resulting fireball, we see a black Kuuga with black eyes fighting some unseen foe in the fire. As the smoke clears, we see Yusuke in the water looking back towards Ichijo and the other officers, notably not giving a thumbs up like he usually would. I absolutely love these episodes for all the reasons that they absolutely terrify me. Because you may have noticed from the way that I wrote that last segment, but I never said it was the Grongi in these episodes that scared me. Okay, so I didn't bring it up in that last segment because I wanted to focus on Yusuke's arc through them, but at the same time, all this is going on, Sakurako was called to investigate something going on back in Nagano, where this story started. A mass murder scene was found in a warehouse near there, but particular thing is all of the victims were Grongi. Sakurako is brought in as an expert on the Grongi alongside another researcher. As they're investigating the frankly terrifying scene, Sakurako finds a symbol drawn in blood on the ceiling, one that bears a startling resemblance to the Kuuga symbol. Alright, here we are, the last 13 episodes of Kamen Rider Kuuga. We're closing in on the end now, and things are just about ready to fall into place. Sakurako and Ichijo discuss the symbol that she found at the site of the Grongi massacre. Ichijo thinks that it must be some kind of warning or call for Kuuga, but Sakurako disagrees. She says that the Rinto were a pacifistic society and that it's strange that they even had a word or character for warrior to begin with. Beyond that, the symbol is slightly different to the one that we know as well. Sakurako theorizes that the symbol may have originated with the Grongi and may have had a meaning that we don't yet know within their language. Meanwhile, Yusuke interrupts a fight between the Bat Grongi and a Scorpion Grongi. Yusuke focuses on the Bat, but somehow it's gotten much stronger than it ever was before and easily defeats Yusuke. However, it seems that it was more interested in its fight against the other Grongi, so it leaves him behind to give chase. It isn't long until we see it again. Shortly later, Yusuke interrupts another fight between the Bat and a Beetle Grongi. This time, it's the Bat that's getting the ever-loving shit kicked out of him. At the same time, Ichijo runs into the Rose Grongi, holding her at gunpoint, firing at her when she tries to turn away. She turns back to face him, saying that the Rinto truly have changed and that she expects that Kuuga will likely end up the same as Daguva, before incapacitating Ichijo. Both the Bat and Beetle Grongi leave Yusuke behind after their fight, and he gets up to go after them, but hears Ichijo being injured, so he goes to rescue him, letting both the Grongi escape. Ichijo is taken to the hospital to recover, but much like Yusuke, this man does not know the meaning of broken bones, so he gets up and rejoins the investigation anyway. Ichijo and Yusuke split up, with Ichijo taking on the task of tracking the Bat, while Yusuke deals with the now active Scorpion Grongi. Yusuke defeats the Scorpion, of course, and speeds out to join Ichijo in tracking the Bat. Both of them arrive on scene, and Yusuke begins fighting the Bat Grongi again, but it has somehow evolved yet again and became even stronger than the last time they fought. The boys get the upper hand for a moment using a sonic device to attack the Grongi's enhanced hearing, but it doesn't get them anywhere, really. Eventually, the Bat senses a being it calls Daguva nearby and goes off to chase him. Yusuke and Ichijo go after the Bat, but lose it in the forest as the sun goes down. We see the two wandering through the forest for a bit before a pillar of light, just like in the first episode, goes up into the sky, letting out a wall of force that knocks them both to the ground. As the light subsides, the two get up and make their way to the source, finding the Bat Grongi completely brutalized hanging from a tree. Okay, seriously, Yusuke, does it have to be on everything that you wear? Oh, and stop climbing in windows, you fucking heathen, use the damn door. Is that a third Ichigo reference? And of course another Grongi attacks, so Yusuke goes out to face it. The Grongi attacked an airplane while it was in flight and then jumped into the ocean, so Yusuke goes to the dock where the police predict it will resurface. As he arrives, he begins sensing some kind of presence. We see flashes of a man wearing white watching him from a distance. Distracted by this other presence, Yusuke doesn't notice when a fucking harpoon is thrown at him, pinning him to a nearby wall. When Ichijo eventually arrives to join him, well after the Grongi has already escaped of course, Yusuke mentions that the presence he felt is exactly like the one they felt in the forest, confirming that Daguva is now well within Tokyo's bounds. Then, as is the formula, Yusuke goes out for a rematch, giving his required pep talk, and defeats the Grongi. Holy shit, Yusuke actually fought and defeated a Grongi on his first try. I mean, he had to have some help from Ichijo shooting it in the back, but he defeated it in a single episode. Tsubaki performs an autopsy on the body of the Bat Grongi, as well as the other Grongi that were killed without exploding by Daguva, and through this we finally get solid confirmation that the Grongi are the same as Kuuga, as Tsubaki finds stones almost exactly like the Amadam within all of them. Not only that, but beyond having an Amadam, while not transformed, the Grongi have the exact same physiology as humans. While this happens, we get another scene of Yusuke being stalked by Daguva. While he drives down the street, he senses Daguva watching him from a nearby rooftop. Yusuke transforms and jumps up to confront him, but sees nothing. He He transforms into Pegasus to try and track him, and when he does get a beat on Daguva, he begins panicking, falling to the floor and being forced out of his transformation. And it's finally time for the final Geguru of the season as the Beetle Grongi finally begins his own, with the targets being male police officers. Yusuke rides out to go stop it, going through most of his forms, and as he does so, we see that the Grongi, much like Yusuke, is able to change as well, being able to copy all of Kuga's base forms and weapons perfectly, countering him at each step. At the same time, Ichijo is watching the fight and notices another Grongi holding an abacus on top of the rooftop. He shoots at the Grongi, missing it but destroying the abacus, which is the way that the Grongi kills during a Geguru, by the way. They never say this in the show, but I'm saying it here. This angers the Grongi and it pushes Ichijo down the stairs. But he manages to pull himself back up from a railing as it flees. Yusuke all this time has been spending an ungodly amount of time getting his ass kicked by the Beetle Grongi, finally deciding to bust out his Rising Mighty form for a kick that does absolutely fucking nothing, apparently. The Beetle Grongi decides to flex on him by revealing that not only can it copy his base forms, but also his rising power as well, as it uses its own kick to finish him off. Seeing that Yusuke can no longer fight, the Grongi loses interest and leaves. Yusuke is taken to the hospital where he dies again. God damn, I didn't realize Kuuga was trying to give Ghost a run for its money with the constant death and revival game. Sakurako convinces Tsubaki to use the defibrillator on him again in hopes that it will give him another power-up. In less than a few hours, Yusuke is back up again and says that he thinks the defibrillator worked as he feels full of new power as he goes off to join Ichijo and the police, who have cornered the final Grongi in an arena. The police finally get their hands on the nerve-destroying rounds we were told about ages ago and put them to use, and the bullets seem to actually work as well. Ichijo is able to put a serious amount of damage on the Beetle Grongi, although not killing it, and Sugita and his partner are able to fully kill another Grongi as it attempts to run away. Yusuke arrives and saves Ichijo from being killed by the Beetle Grongi and moves the fight out into the forest. Now being on equal ground with the Beetle Grongi, the two fight and they prepare their finishing moves. Yusuke then unveils another new form, this time a black Kuuga with gold trim, but notably not the same as the one we saw in his visions from earlier. This new form is called Amazing Mighty, and is able to finally put down the Beetle Grongi in a massive explosion that leaves the forest the two were fighting in completely destroyed. The episode ends as we see Daguva clearly for the first time, as he announces the coming of the ultimate darkness. The next episode opens as we see flashes of Yusuke's first attempt at fighting Daguva. Spoiler alert, it did not go well, as Yusuke got completely destroyed by Daguva, with the collateral deaths numbering almost at 100 people. Yusuke goes around visiting all of his friends, including some terrifying Sync children, before going to his final fight against Daguva. Meanwhile, Ichijo has one final meeting with the Rose Grongi where he attempts to get answers, but she just turns to leave. Ichijo shoots her in the back as she does so, killing her. She has barely enough time to turn around to face him, giving him a smile as she falls into the ocean. Yusuke and Ichijo ride out into the mountains where Daguva is waiting for him. Yusuke tells Ichijo that he's going to fight with Kuga's full power, but he might lose himself in the hate and rage the form embodies. He asks that should this happen, that Ichijo shoot him, even telling him to aim for the Amadam in order to kill him entirely. Ichijo says that he hates how things have come to this, but Yusuke disagrees, saying that if things didn't play out like this, he never would have melted all the people he did through his actions. He finishes the thought by asking Ichijo to watch his last henshin as he finally transforms into Kuuga Ultimate, the black Kuuga we saw almost 13 episodes ago, but this time with red eyes. I won't spoil the final fight between Yusuke and Daguva, as it is unironically some of the best TV I've seen in my life, and despite how short and simple the fight is, it's also one of the most effective scenes in the show. And now, at long last, we've reached the end of our journey with Kuuga as we step into the final episode of this series. Episode 49. Yusuke. Much like the beginning of episode 48, we see Ichijo go around all the various characters in the show as we catch up with them over the 3-month time skip. All of them have moved on with their lives, improved by their interactions and experiences with Yusuke as they wonder how he's doing, as he left almost immediately after the defeat of Daguva. Ichijo and Sakurako talk about how Yusuke had to let go of the better parts of himself in order to defeat Daguva, but Sakurako notes how she translated one last part of the writing on Goran. The passage states that should the Holy Spring dry up completely, that Goran will disappear from this world. Sakurako states this must mean that the kindness and humanity in Yusuke must still be there, as Goran is yet to crumble to dust. The show ends as we see Yusuke on the beach in a far-off country, juggling for some very unimpressed Western kids. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that retelling of Kamen Rider Kuuga's story, and I applaud you if you actually watched through the whole thing. But we're not quite done yet. Now that we've wrapped up our journey with Yusuke and the others, I want to take a look back at everything we experienced, starting with the characters of the show. Yusuke Godai, played by Joe Odagiri. Can I just say that I absolutely love this man to death? Beyond a doubt, Yusuke Godai is one of my top 3 main writers in the entire series. Yusuke is just very simply a superhero through and through, and beyond that, I think the series uses him very effectively as a kind of personification for the best parts of humanity. The most effective way that the show does this is through the effect that Yusuke has on others. Of course, throughout the show, it's always shown that Yusuke has a wealth of life experience, and beyond that is endlessly optimistic, which allows him to be a very effective teacher for the show's younger audience. But in addition to that, the show also examines the effect that a person like Yusuke can have just by walking into a room or even being present in any way. One of my favorite scenes in the show comes from episode 40. The police are having a discussion on how they're tired of having to fight the Grongi and the mental toll that this case is taking on both them and civilians. The mood in the room is quite bleak, but the change is almost immediate as Yusuke calls them over the phone to ask how everyone is doing. He says he was concerned for their health as they all work so hard and that the weather has taken a turn for the colder. I absolutely love this scene for how perfectly encapsulates Yusuke's character. Even in a supernatural battle for the fate of humanity, Yusuke still takes the time to worry about his friends getting sick, and that small bit of normalcy and genuine kindness is enough to pick up everyone's spirits. Some may say that Yusuke is a flat character that doesn't go through much of an arc, and I'd have to say that I agree. But I don't think that makes him a bad character, as the true strength of a character as genuine as Yusuke is not in how he changes himself, but how he changes those around him. Okay, so at the beginning of the video I said I'd talk about Joe Odagiri earlier, and I will. Joe Odagiri is a great actor who single-handedly is the reason that Kamen Rider almost exclusively casts attractive men in their mid-20s for their leads. The Odagiri effect comes in from the fact that the housewives who would put Kamen Rider on for their kids later went on to watch it themselves when they realized that the cast was filled with very attractive men. That is basically it, but it is a genuinely funny thing to notice as time goes on, because that effect hit hard. Now, as for my opinions on Odagiri himself, I do have some problems with the man's unabashed hate of Toku in general, and with him being the sole reason that Yusuke has never appeared in any form of cameo in the later seasons. He does have a genuine respect for Kuuga as a series, as well as his co-stars from the show, so I can't give him too much shit, but I do have to bring it up. Next up, Kaoru Ichijo, played by Shingo Katsurayama. Ichijo should have been a writer. That is all. Nah, I kid. But seriously, even the manga got this right. Make my boy a writer. He deserves it. Ichijo is a very interesting character as well, although much like Yusuke, he doesn't have much of a lot of an arc. The interesting bits with Ichijo actually comes through his interactions with the Rose Grongi. I didn't go into major detail with these scenes as they are mostly irrelevant to the plot, but one thing you may have noticed from my retelling is that the Rose Grongi notes multiple times about how the Rinto are becoming more and more violent, just like the Grongi, and I think this is most evident in Ichijo's interactions with her. One thing that I noticed only on this rewatch is that Ichijo is almost always the aggressor in these interactions. Even when she turns to leave him behind, not having killed anyone in this entire series, Ichijo without hesitation on multiple occasions simply shoots her in the back. Ichijo is all the evidence she would ever need to back up her point. The humans are scared of them, and that is all the justification they need to kill on sight, even if the Grongi in question poses no threat to them. And I think the most interesting facet of this aspect of the show is that you can really justify both sides, as it is true that the Grongi as a whole are a major threat to humanity, and Ichijo is justified in believing that the Rose Grongi poses a general threat even if he is mistaken. And of course, I can't not mention how good Yusuke and Ichijo are together. As I noted when discussing this show with my friends during the writing of this episode, Kamen Rider has always been a little bit gay. I don't ship it, but the show makes it really hard for me not to want to. Sakurako Sawatari, played by Kazumi Murata. The last character I'm going to talk about at length is everyone's favorite glorified Google Translate character, Sakurako. Now, I'll be honest, as I do genuinely like Sakurako as a character, even if there isn't much to her. Sakurako's interactions with Yusuke and the other characters during less tense moments of the series, as well as her unwavering faith in Yusuke in dire moments, help her become a lot more likable than the plot relevance would usually allow. It is sad how she doesn't really get to do a whole lot in the series, though as you may have noticed in my retelling, all she really does to influence the main plot is translate various Rinto writings throughout the series. But it is lucky that this is an issue that the series would address with its many later female leads, eventually giving us a female secondary writer. Supporting cast. Alright, I gotta admit, there's one place where I think Kuuga might stumble a little bit, and it's the supporting cast. Not to say I don't like them, in fact there are quite a few of them that I find very entertaining, notably the Detective Sugita and Dr. Tsubaki, but notably they were the only ones that I found really interesting. I think they could have found a way to integrate more of the supporting cast into the general plot, more than them all just being around for moral support and sometimes discovering or developing new pieces of gear for Yusuke and Ichijo. But as I said, this is really the only part of Kuuga that I have any real problem with. For as much as I gave the constant cycle of Yusuke fights Grongi, loses, fights Grongi again, wins, flack during the retelling, it's not that noticeable when you're just watching the show non-critically. The Grongi. Okay, so I have to talk about the series' main villains, right? The Grongi are genuinely some of the best Kamen Rider villains in my opinion because of how they affect those around them. Notably, Yusuke, Ichijo, and the police. The amount of pressure and tension their presence causes on screen is palpable and surprisingly able to be carried through the entire series, as I never got tired of seeing what new Grongi Yusuke would have to face off against. Their designs are amazing and genuinely creepy in some cases, and they pulled all of this off while genuinely being pretty cool. If I had to pick a few favorites out of the bunch for design and character, it would definitely be the Porcupine Grongi, Beetle Grongi, and Dagava himself. The presence of Dagava in particular is a genuine threat that is sold so well by how him even being around in the general area makes everyone start freaking out. And on top of that, I love how Dagava's final form is very reminiscent of Kuuga himself, further outlining the similarities between the two of them, but also more outlining the differences in their personalities. Music and sound. So, the general music in Kuuga is quite good in my opinion, with most of the soundtrack having a very ancient and mysterious sound to it, with many of the songs almost sounding like a kind of hymn or even a ceremonial song. It really helps to bring Kuuga's concept of an ancient threat coming back to terrorize the modern age to life very well in my opinion. If I had to nitpick one thing, it would be the lack of vocal themes in the show. The later seasons having vocal insert themes for various writers and forms is just the norm, but it wasn't back at the start of the Heisei Era, so I can't complain too much. Now, as for the vocal songs that the show does have, being its opening and ending, I absolutely love them. Kamen Rider Kuuga, being the opening theme of the show, gives off the exact kind of vibes I want from this, on top of being genuinely a very good song. But the one song that I absolutely love above all others in this soundtrack is Aozora ni Naru, the ending theme. This song is exactly what I hear when I think of Kuuga, but more so of Yusuke himself. It is the perfect song to listen to when you're feeling down or stressed, as somehow it's able to wash all of that away in its relaxing melody. And for some reason it reminds me of the music from Pokemon Colosseum, and I really hope I'm not the only one. Action. Kuuga's action is pretty good for the time it came out. The fight choreography is mostly simple, keeping the actors' feet on the ground and not involving a lot of the flips or stunts Modern Rider is known for. But that's what makes Kuuga's action stand the test of time for just how brutal it can get sometimes. While it doesn't feel a lot like modern superhero stuff we get nowadays with big action, big effects, Kuuga gives off the vibe of a hero that is still very human in its abilities, which makes the fight feel a lot more real and thus kind of disturbing in the moments that it gets very violent, which I feel was probably the intention. After all, what's better for giving people hope than bringing them up from the depths of despair? Side content. So as the first series in the Heisei Era, Kuuga doesn't have a whole lot of side content, at least the side content that it keeps to itself, as Kuuga has only a total of 4 specials and no movies, with only one of them really being relevant, which is why it's the only one in the synopsis. 2 of them are a recap and a director's cut of the first 2 episodes, but the last one I haven't talked about is sometimes considered to be Kuuga's 50th episode. But that's more of a joke than anything, as the whole episode is really just one big meta gag. I do recommend it if you want to watch through it though, as it is actually kind of funny. The one big piece of side content Kuuga has is its manga adaptation. The Kamen Rider Kuuga manga, while sharing many of the same plot points and characters, is an entirely different beast in and of itself. So I won't be going too deep into it beyond just saying that I believe it's quite good, and the new takes it has on the characters are interesting, and the art is frankly phenomenal, and they made my boy a writer. And now we've come to the end of this first leg of our journey. Kamen Rider Kuuga is one of my favorite seasons in this franchise. While its plot is slow-moving and the episode-to-episode experience is very Monster of the Week focused, its action is old and its effects outdated. But while Kuuga may be a product of its time to a significant degree, there is one thing that certainly hasn't aged with time, and that is the show's heart. To put it in the most simple of words, Kuuga isn't a series that you watch for the complex plot or amazing action. It is a series that you watch for the way it makes you feel and the characters that you get to meet along the way. It is a series that is more concerned with making you understand its themes of analyzing the true nature of humanity, both the good and the bad, and how we can grow to be better by choosing to focus on the good parts of ourselves rather than wallowing in the bad. Without a doubt, Kamen Rider Kuuga starts the Heisei Era off with a bang, as it easily claims its spot in the S tier. And that is the end of Kamen Rider Kuuga, as well as the end of the first episode of Journey Through the Decades. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the video, as I did work quite hard on it, and I'm looking forward to discussing this series with all of you in the comments, so please do try to keep it civil. Also, as the first real episode of the series, I would really appreciate you all letting me know what you thought of it, as I'm sure the series will be damn near unrecognizable when we reach the end. And now that we've completed our journey with Yusuke and the others, learning what it means to really be human, we move on to the next leg of our journey as we awaken our souls with Kamen Rider Agito. Get And one last thing before we go, I'd like to start doing something. Each of these shows has something to teach its viewers, and I don't think by being an adult or being a critic makes those messages any less impactful. So I'd like to leave you all with one of my favorite quotes from each season, starting with Kuuga at the end of these episodes. With that said, thank you for watching, and I'll leave you with these final words from Yusuke.
さっきから五代さんの言ってること、きれい事ばっかりやんか。
そうだよ。でもだからこそ現実にしたいじゃない。本当は綺麗事がいいんだもん。これでしかやり取りできないなんて悲しすぎるから。
重い荷物を枕にしたら深呼吸青空になる目を開けてもつぶっても同じ景色は過ぎてゆくけど今見てなくちゃ気づけない君を連れて行こう悲しみのない未来まで君がくれた笑顔だけポケットにしまって僕は青空になる